This video lesson is about non-defining relative clauses. But before we go, let us study the examples to recall what a defining relative clause is. Mr. Rajshekhar Reddy, who was our former CM, introduced the Arogyasri scheme. Here, Mr. RSR Rajshekhar Reddy is defined to segregate him from any other RSRs, Rajshekhar Reddys. But when he is mentioned as Dr. Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy, he is clearly identified beyond doubt. So, in the above example, the clause who was our former CM is called defining relative clause. As explained earlier, a defining relative clause identifies one among many of the same set or group. Now look at this. Dr. Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy, who was our former CM, introduced Arogyasri scheme. Here, who was our former CM just gives information about him, as there is no need to identify him separately. Hence, it is put in between two commas as shown in the brackets. It is as good as putting it in parentheses in brackets. Hence, this is called a non-defining relative clause. A few more examples. My wife, who is in the States, has divorced me. Here, who is in the States defines the subject my wife, because he has more than one wife and only the wife in the States divorced him, but not the other or others. Next, my wife, who is in the States, has divorced me. In this sentence, who is in the States is separated from the subject my wife by a comma. It gives some additional information about his wife, that is, his only wife. Hence, this is a non-defining relative clause. A few more examples. My son, who is in Australia, has married a Japanese woman. It means he has two or more sons, and the one in Australia has married a Japanese woman. Hence, who is in Australia is a defining relative clause. My son, who is in Australia, has married a Japanese woman. Here, who is in Australia kept between two commas is a non-defining relative clause, and he is the only son. Mr. Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy, who is our CM, has introduced the Nadu Nedu scheme. Here, Ash is a non-defining relative clause. It is also called a non-restrictive relative clause. The above sentence can be said like this also. Mr. Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy, our CM, has introduced the Nadu Nedu scheme. Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was our former PM, nationalized Indian banks. Who was our former PM is a non-defining relative clause. It can also be stated as Mrs. Indira Gandhi, our former PM, nationalized Indian banks. So, the non-defining relative clauses are used only to add extra information, but not concerned in identifying or distinguishing one separately from others of the same set or group. A few more non-defining relative clauses. The Taj, which is in Agra, is one of the 7 wonders of the world. The Teen Murti Bhavan, which was the residence of Nehruji, who was our first Prime Minister, is now a museum. Tirumala, where Lord Balaji's shrine is located, is visited by several thousands of pilgrims every day. Note, the relative pronouns who for persons, which for things, and where for places are used. Sometimes that can also be used for both persons and things, as in the Kondareddy Burju, that is near Old Bus Stand, is the landmark of Kurnool.